Now let's talk about NL2BR. So NL2BR. And what that means is a new line to BR tag, HTML tag. Inserts HTML line breaks before all new lines in a string. And that's basically the equivalent. This is the HTML new line break. One which is basically XHTML compatible, as it says here in the parameters, the other one not. So it returns a string, which we are passing through as the argument, which is basically updated with these BR tags. And if you look at the parameters, it takes a string as the first one, which is mandatory, and then the optional one as a second. As you can see, square brackets again, so it's a second. Optional one by default is true. And it basically tells us whether to use XHTML compatible line breaks or not. Now, new lines is something that you won't see in the editor, and they are different based on what system you are using. PHP will automatically detect it, detects which one to use, basically which one to obviously convert to these BR tags. If we go to our editor, what I'm going to do is to start with a string. So string equals, and I'm going to start first line, and then what I'm going to do is concatenate it with the PHP underscore EOL, which is PHP's built-in constant, and it does return, basically it's got the current system's new line character associated with it. So basically you don't have to be worried about figuring out what's the new line basically combination for my given system, whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X or any other system. So now we know that we have a new line here. What I'm going to do next is basically concatenate this string with, and I'm just going to make sure that everything is in line, second line, and the same thing, PHP end of line. This constant is called, and then string, then we have third line, and again PHP end of line. And what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to echo this string in the browser. Let's see what we're gonna get. If we go to our PHP course.dev, as you can see, everything is in one line. And if we preview everything, if we do view page source, you can see these items in a source are on the new, each one is on a new line. And this is because the source view of the HTML document recognizes the new line character. However, HTML document, the browser, when it reads the HTML document, it won't render the new lines in the view. It's only in the source view that you can actually see it. So in order for us to be able to reflect it in on the page, basically in our HTML document, viewing it in a browser, what we need to do is to use this NL2BR function. So NL2BR, we wrap this string with that, and if we now save it and preview it in a browser, there we go. All these new line characters, this PHP underscore EOL, basically end of line, a constant, now has been converted into the BR tag. And if we now preview the source of the page, you can see we have BR tags. Now the second optional parameter, if we go back here, this is XHTML, is by default set to true. If we set it to false, if I just go back to the editor and I'm going to pass this second argument as false, then what's going to happen is these BR tags will be converted. You can see I've reloaded the source view of the page, have now been converted to non-XHTML version of the tag. And now just to, obviously you probably know HTML, or at least a little bit. XHTML, basically when you have the single tags which don't have a closing option with them, basically like BR, HR, or let's say image or any other tag. XHTML ones, they always end with the / before the closing right angle bracket, basically. That's the difference between XHTML and start.html. Obviously in HTML5 you can use either, so it's entirely up to you which one you prefer. But by default they are XHTML. I wouldn't be bothered with this, specifying the second argument if you obviously need to use this NL2BR function. Next function on our list is number format. So number underscore format. There we go. And what it does, it formats a number with grouped thousands. And if we scroll down, it returns a string, and we have the first variation, which takes the number and an optional decimal point. And then we have a second variation, which takes 4 arguments. And as you can see, none of them is optional. So you can either use it with 2, one of which might be optional, or you can use them with 4, but you cannot use them with 3 arguments. And what it does, basically, it takes the number, which we want to format, then number of decimal places that we want to use with the return string. Then we have basically the character we want to use for the decimal point, and then we have the character for the thousand separator. And that's exactly what it says here down there at the bottom, basically. This function accepts either 1, 2, or 4 parameters, not 3. If only 1 parameter is given, number will be formatted without decimals, but with a comma between every group of thousands. If 2 parameters are given, number will be formatted with decimals, with a dot, basically used for the decimal point, in front, and a comma between every group of thousands. If all 4 parameters are given, number will be formatted with decimals, dec underscore point instead of a dot before the decimals. So basically you can specify what character you want for decimals. And obviously this thousand separator instead of comma between every group of thousands. And there we go for the parameters. The number being formatted, decimals sets the number of decimal points, then we've got dec point which sets the separator for the decimal point, and then we have the thousand separator sets the thousand separator, and returned value is a number, basically a formatted version of a number. But as you can see, if we scroll up here, it is actually a string that it returns. So if we go back to the editor and let's give it a try, we are going to start with a number variable, and I'm going to associate 1000, actually 10,000. Let's make it 10,000 with 1 decimal point, which is just 1. And now what I'm going to do is simply use echo to display the result in the browser, number format, and I'm passing this number without any other arguments. So if we go back to our page, refresh the page, and there we go, 10,000 with the comma default 1000 separator. Okay, so now I want to use decimal points. So I want to say that I want 2 decimal points. So if I go back, refresh the page, and there we go. We only specified 1, but 0 has been added automatically because we want 2 decimal points. Obviously you can increase it to as much as you want. Let's say 4. Then obviously all these will be added after the full stop by default. Okay, now we know we cannot specify, let's just keep it with 2 decimal points. We cannot use 3, but we can specify 3 arguments. So let's say for the decimal point, I want to use the star symbol. And for the thousands, let's use colon. If we go back, refresh the page, and there we go. Thousands. For the thousand separator, colon. For the decimal point separator, it uses the star symbol. So that's basically how number format works. Next function is round. So we go for the search round. And what it does, it basically rounds a float. It returns a floating point number as well. It takes a float and then optional precision, which by default is 0. And then we have mode as well as an integer using one of the constants. Returns the rounded value of the first argument val to specified precision, which is a second argument, number of digits after the decimal point. Basically, the precision is just specifying the decimal point. And then we have precision can also be negative or 0, which is the default value associated with it. Then if we go down to the parameters, value obviously is the first one, precision is the second one, and the mode, use one of the following constants to specify the mode in which rounding occurs. And then you've got 4 options here. First one is round half up, basically round value to the precision decimal places away from 0 when it is halfway there, making 1.5 into 2 and minus 1.5 into minus 2. Then we have a round half down, round value down to precision decimal places towards 0 when it is halfway there, making 1.5 into 1 and minus 1.5 into minus 1. Basically, this first one goes up, the other one rounds down. Then we have round half even, round value to precision decimal places towards the next even value, and then we have half odd, which does the opposite, basically rounds the number to precision decimal places towards the next odd value. So let's give it a try, and obviously it returns a rounded value. Let's give it a try in the editor, and we are going to start with simple numbers. So number, I'm going to create a variable, associate number 10 with it, integer 10, and I'm going to simply echo round number. And as you may imagine, obviously nothing exciting is going to happen. It's just a number, even though we rounded it. Obviously we didn't specify how many decimal places or anything like this. And this number, this integer, is just a straight integer. It doesn't have any decimal places anyway. So even if I specify that I want 2 decimal places, have a look at what's going to happen. Refresh the page. It stays as 10 as a whole number. It doesn't basically display any decimal places. So if you need decimal places, then you can obviously wrap it with the number format which we've discussed earlier. So if we haven't got any decimal places, it will ignore this second precision argument. But let's say I've got 1 as a decimal point, as decimal number. So now, because we specified 2, you would expect that it's going to be full stop and 10. But no, it's still going to give us just 1. It's not going to add 0 to the end. Again, you need precisely number of decimal places, use number format. But if we are going to do something like, say, 1111, say 4 decimal places, then it will trim it to just 2. That's what round does. It trims rather than adds to it. Okay, so we've tried that. Let's now go for a number. Let's say 1.555. And what I'm going to do now is we are going to keep this with 2 decimal places, but let's try one of these constants. So first one is going to be PHP round half up. We are going to start this. So we have 2 decimal places, 1.555. If we go back to the browser, refresh the page, we've got 1.56 because it rounded the latest number basically up by 1. So if we try and round it down using the built-in PHP constant, refresh the page, it gave us 5. So basically what it did, it rounded this last digit down, so it gave us obviously 5. But if I was to use 7 here, save the page and refresh it in a browser, you can see it rounded down to 7, but it still was more than just 5. So obviously it converted this to 6, but it still was rounding this last one obviously to 6, because the last one was bigger than half of the value. Now the last 2 constants we can try with, but I'm going to change the number to 5 now, because we are going to use half even constant. So it's going to round it to the even number. So if I refresh the page, it stays as 1.5.6, even though the third number is halfway through. So we rounded this number up to make sure that the number is even. Obviously 6 is even number, and if I do it with odd, then it's going to keep it exactly the same way, because obviously 5 is already odd, so it's going to go 1.555. So that's how this round function works with this predefined PHP constants. The next function is called ceil. So ceil. There we go. And it rounds fractions up. It returns a float, takes a float, returns the next highest integer value by rounding up value if necessary. And obviously it takes the value to be round, and then value returned up to the next highest integer. The return value of ceil is still of type float, as the value range of float is usually bigger than that of integer. So basically it's a float, but it's, when you see it, you'll see that it's just a simple integer. So echo ceil and then value, let's say put 5.6. What we are going to get, if we go and preview it in a browser, refresh the page, it's 6. So basically this decimal point 6 has been rounded. It rounded our value, the main integer, to basically 6 rather than 5. We have now 6. If I try this with, let's say 4.4, it will round it up to 5. As you can see, the next available integer is what we're going to get. Now, this is ceil. Next one is the floor. So if we go back to the documentation, on the right hand side, if I check here, there we go, we've got floor, or you can simply search for it as well. So this one does the opposite. It rounds fractions down, again returns the same thing, takes the same thing, returns the next lowest integer value by rounding down value if necessary. So let's go back to the editor and let's try floor now. So floor, there we go. If we save it and preview it in the browser, you can see we have 4. So it's basically like stripping this decimal point completely from the value. So if I now try the same with, say, 9.999, save it, refresh the browser, and we get 9. Obviously, decimal point has been taken away. So that's how ceil and floor work.